an instrument everybody loves.
Let's give a warm round of welcome to Arno Smit.
Jeez, thank you guys.
Thank you. Welcome to Startup Grind. It's really great to have you here.
Yeah, we did it a few months ago, and
Yes.
I'm super excited that you guys actually took the time to come out, to come and listen to us, and thank you, and I hope you walk away with a couple of key takeaways and stuff, so thank you for coming.
Thank you. And I think you should clap for yourselves. Thank you for coming. We'll start with your background and tell us about your journey, like growing up in Namibia. How long did you stay there before you started moving? And yeah.
It's a little bit of a nomad, to be honest. You know, I've born in Namibia, moved around a little bit. I was in the Northern Cape for some time, up in Uppington, and then moved back to Namibia, studied there, eventually came to lovely Cape Town, and kind of like thought I was going to become this, you know, amazing webmaster. That's obviously the thing that you kind of like got underneath your belt back then. Studied in Northern College. Back then it was Tegenberg. Eventually went to the UK. Met a lovely lady over there. Followed her all over the world and stuff. What would have been about 3.5 months in Australia actually ended up being about 3.5 years. Got headhunted by Apple to work on the software side and do a little bit of things like independently. And one thing essentially led to one another. You know, myself and one of the GMs of the company moved away, and we essentially took our first step at building up a business, building up like a real internet-based business based on a particular issue that he saw back in the day. And this issue was quite interesting. You know, he obviously well connected. He wanted to become like a pilot. Got his own private pilot's license, but he saw a real issue in the market that as soon as he started reaching out to people that were potentially selling airplanes and stuff like that, it was not available. There was way too little information, so he actually ended up spending way more time than what he should have at the end of the day, and it was extremely expensive for these guys to kind of like advertise. Now, usually what happened is like he had to get into a car and he had to go to some of these individual like airports, drive there, go and check out the airplane, obviously do his own inspection and everything, and it was months and months before he actually made a decision that, first of all, the plane that he wanted to buy, he didn't want to buy that anymore, but now he wanted to start a company around the issues that he had been facing. And at that stage, you know, he was looking for someone who was obviously capable of getting the platform up and running, being able to kind of like be there from both a design perspective, but also a storytelling perspective. And we saw that one of the key things that we wanted to kind of like take away from this was like all of the issues that he had at the end of the day, we wanted to address that. We wanted to make sure that information was always up to date. We wanted to make sure that it was easy to advertise, and we wanted to make sure that the information was ample for everyone to kind of like see what is it that you're potentially buying. Now, this thing took off. I mean, it took off very, very quickly. We put the other company out of business because we saw a very different angle to it. And you know, this particular angle was more from an aspect of, if you want to be successful in a business, you got to think about it in a very different way, right? You cannot just build something and think that someone's actually going to come, but you need to go beyond that extra mile. So we already saw back then that if you're going to be a software business, you need to be a hardware business, and you need to be a content business. So we started writing our own journals. We went out to all of the independent airports and just said to the guys, hey, I know you're putting a P-51 Mustang back in the air. We'd love to just go for a joyride and you know, take a couple of photos and videos and stuff like that. And 3-4 months later, I'd been in DC-3s and DC-4s and Red Bull Air Races and F-16 jets and all this type of stuff, just for an aspect of picking up the telephone and asking the guys if we could help them with some free marketing. And that's how we built a community around us. Now, one thing led to another, and this was a fantastic business. I mean, I always dreamt of being a always dreamt of being a pilot, you know, who doesn't? I mean, obviously, if you kind of like watch Top Gun, that's like the only thing that you wanted to be as a kid.
Yeah.
And we had great ambitions. We wanted to kind of like scale the business, and for me, Europe was the next step.
Yeah.
My wife being European, I said, listen, let's take this business, let's actually go to Europe and let's make a massive thing out of this. But as soon as I arrived in Europe, I figured out that all of the paperwork had been falsified and I lost everything in my business. So I had to kind of like start again. Now, what I like to look at this for is like, I learned a very expensive lesson in terms of like, how do I not want to do business with people? I wanted to make sure that I am honest, that I'm transparent, and that people understand when they go into a particular aspect of what is it that we're doing at the end of the day.
Yeah. And then I'll take you back a little bit, and we'll dive into the actual businesses. But tell us about your journey from being a designer, web developer, and then like how you kept adding on skills, finding something that you really enjoyed to do, whether alone or part of a team.
I mean, my journey started quite early. Like, to be honest, from like 6 years old, you know, my parents were always pushing for innovative ideas and stuff like that. And it might sound very simple that, you know, someone starts with like selling popcorn at a public pool, which probably doesn't make sense, but people wanted to buy it anyway at the end of the day, right? And then I started washing cars, where I had a lot of my friends that wanted to wash under my name, so I started taking commission for it. So there's always been that little bit of a drive, and I think it's something which is to an extent inherited because my family, they've always been very entrepreneurial. You know, they've owned warehouses and they've had amazing like passive incomes and everything from it. So it's something that I have inherited. I would like to say it's something that I've always kind of like strived towards, and I've just seen that there's a particular way in how you can add value if you do things in the right way. But in terms of like going from a designer to a developer, I don't know, that shift happened kind of like normally. I think the more you start speaking with people, the more empathy I got for certain things, and that depth just led me to wanting to understand a little bit more about certain topics.
And I see that it's very difficult usually, and that was a question that was asked again 2 weeks ago at the conference where we were about design, to say, do you find, is it better to look for one person that's also very good in design and in dev skills, or it's better to separate them?
They call that a unicorn.
Yeah,
they don't exist. They don't exist. Now, for me, it was, you know, the curiosity was there, and because we were so small, we had relevant kind of like skill sets. And I'm not calling myself a specialist in any case, but I'd like to see myself as a generalist, you know, having a lot of knowledge about a lot of specific industries and being able to apply that in a relevant way, but also know where I'm absolutely out of my depth. And that's why, you know, the things that I don't like doing, I actually bring in someone who's a lot more capable of it and just kind of like help my ideas become a reality at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. And now coming to FundedByMe, tell us about that. Like, there's co-founding that and the journey. I think that's where you're at now in terms of you had to, when your papers were falsified, what were the next steps? What did you do then?
I mean, got to Sweden, I had to kind of like build up my network again, and obviously like these events, you know, none of that type of stuff existed back in the days, but you're not going to a bar, you're not going to a coffee place and a little cafe and so on, and you met certain people, but I took the normal route of actually applying to an agency and going like, okay, they need some, you know, IT skills, how can I put myself out there, not being afraid of kind of like a knowledge barrier or a language barrier and so on, but then just connecting with a lot of individuals to see how can I get into the system and start networking with a lot of relevant people. So that gave me a little bit of a head start, and the first individual that I was actually matched with ended up being my co-founder in FundedByMe. But we did a lot of projects together. I mean, we did stuff for Stockholm City, we ended up doing stuff for Toyota, we ended up doing things in various different industries and doing, I mean, whatever the typical kind of like web agency does back then. But we got kind of tired of it, that we were doing things for someone else and they seemed to kind of like reap the rewards. And really what we wanted to do was enable people to kind of like help themselves, so to speak. So as TEDx is kind of like today, that was a little bit like the first idea. We wanted to take those grassroots ideas, float it on a particular platform, and make sure that individuals actually had the ability to kind of like partake in these particular ideas. Now, for us, with kind of like the business background and with all of these documents being falsified and stuff like that, I wanted to take the right route back then. Well, not back then, I wanted to take the right route. And for me, it was more like, let's do it proper, let's actually set up a business, let's make sure that all of the paperwork and everything is ready, and let's actually finance this thing, right? How do we get the financing in for it so that we could create a little bit of leeway for ourselves, so we don't have to just grab and grasp at every particular project that is out there, but we could give ourselves some breathing room to show that we can do this, we can create a business out of it, and that we have a set of metrics that we could show. So we went to Kickstarter. Those guys were the biggest ones out there. We pitched the idea to them. It got turned down not just once, but multiple times. We actually had a friend in San Francisco that tried to pitch the idea again. And it was everything from, you're not right for our community, you don't fit the San Francisco type of people. I mean, whatever you could actually think about. But that was how, like, what you'd like to call a light bulb moment. You know, we essentially took that and just plagiarized it and copied it, but thought in terms of like, if we were two people sitting in Sweden that didn't have access to these tools, how can we actually enable other ones like us to get access to funding? Yeah. And that was like the start of FundedByMe.
Okay, and what do you look for when you are trying to find a co-founder? A lot of people struggle to find a co-founder, and is it critical to have a co-founder?
Depends if I have the investor hat on or the entrepreneur. I think from both aspects it is, yes, because you do not want to go through this journey alone. It is hard, it's going to be a lot of curveballs that are going to be thrown at you, and even statistically, I think the only successful person or individual that has made it has kind of like potentially been Mark Zuckerberg, but to an extent he had people that founded the company with him. So I would say find someone who can share that burden with you, so that when you doubt yourself and when you're down in the trenches and you're not kind of like thinking about this idea, that you at least have some source of truth that is going to put you back on course.
Yeah. And so with co-founders, right, and with partnerships, a lot of people struggle because you find that if you have one argument, then that's it, that's the end. It's like in a relationship, you fight once and that's it, I'm out, done. How do you define like type of arguments or disagreements that would break a relationship and the one that shouldn't? Or are there type of arguments that should?
I think that you have to be very down to earth and very kind of like upfront about what is it that you guys want out of the relationship in the beginning. I mean, it's like any type of marriage, right? You're not gonna try and be the one person, and then all of a sudden when you get married, you want to be the other type of person, because then it's just like, it's behind the shadows and stuff. Let me tell you that any type of company will have arguments, will have struggles, because you have very different type of personalities. You might have someone who's extremely visionary, and you might have another person who is extremely detailed, right? And these, particularly if they are, let's say, developers and they are individual, like business people, these two don't mix. Like, they're two different beasts, and they don't know how to communicate with each other.
So one says, look, we're going to make it in the future, it's good, let's go. The other one says, no, this is not good enough. The other one says, let's launch. Like, no, it's not perfect to launch.
The other one is thinking in his mind, like, how do I need to change this internally, and how many lines of code do you actually need to push to get that thing out into the market, so it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, and now, FundedByMe, tell us about the types of funding that you do as FundedByMe, and just maybe for people who don't know what it is, like, explain to us what FundedByMe is and the types of investment you do.
So I'm going to try and break it down to a very easy level to understand. And essentially what we do is we turn passionate people into passionate owners. It is as simple as that. We look at each and every single...
Even just like what you said, like putting it in one sentence, that's like, wow. And remember the last time we had the conversation again, part of it was pitching, where you say, okay, introduce yourself and say what you're doing in one line. But anyway, continue. I interrupted that, but I like that clarity.
That comes with years of kind of like pitching and refining the ideas and stuff like that. And I mean, we essentially created a platform where we enable ambitious businesses to list themselves and find a network that resonates with them who can fuel their growth.
Great. Excellent. And what would be the process of crowdfunding that would be most likely to succeed? Like, one, people think I just put out a campaign and ask people to support me, and then crickets, nothing's happening.
Yeah, it's not easy. So the thing here is that I think to an extent, particularly in South Africa, crowdfunding hasn't actually made it mainstream, right? It hasn't been sold in the right way, it hasn't been communicated in the right way, and that is, it could be due to kind of like a cultural barrier, because I would like to say that in Europe things are a little bit more advanced. You know, we have had incubators for a long time, we have had accelerators for a long time, and we have had things like mentors and advisors and people actually coming in to help you understand what your company is and what your company actually does. Now, breaking that down, I would actually say that the reason why it hasn't actually worked to an extent is most of the times when you do speak to entrepreneurs, and particularly like early stage businesses, they cannot pitch Funded by Me the way that I did that right now. It's very easy to create a complicated business. It's very complicated to create an easy business.
Wow, that's treatable.
Yes.
Just teasing me in there.
Totally. Brilliant. And you're absolutely right that a lot of times people think that when you say something in a simple statement, then it means it's not innovative, therefore it's not worth funding. So as a result, to say we're building a blockchain-based AI application that will prepare companies for the fourth industrial revolution. What did you just say?
Absolutely, and you can kind of like take that back to, I like to use the car analogy, right? And someone actually walking into a dealership. And you're going to find a sleazy, anyone a car salesman? I should have thought about that before.
It is what's it is.
You're the good one, don't worry.
That's what he said.
But you're going to find a car salesman who's going to try and pitch something in a very particular way. And it's going to be something like this. It's going to be a 2011 BMW X3 that can go from 0 to 100 kilometers a second in 4 seconds with a 2.2 liter diesel engine, automatic, 135 kilowatt, blah, blah, blah. You've already lost me, right? My eyes are tearing. Or you can turn it the other way around, and you can be someone who says, first of all, understands who the individual or individuals are and what their needs are. And for me, I'm a family person, right? You can turn that around and you can go, this is a affordable family car that'll take you from A to B in style and comfort. Which one would you rather be? Now, there are some people that actually understand the technicalities and that like to dig into that technicalities. But if I'm gonna take all of that technical stuff and try and sell it to my grandma, she's gonna walk away and she's gonna go make a cup of tea and she's gonna find a reason that, no, I'm gonna, that's stuff that I don't understand. So how do you as a business individual figure out your company in a very short sentence?
Yeah. So it's like, if I want to pitch my idea, I've got an internal combustion machine that has got wheels, and we use that sometimes to transport people from. Okay, instead of just saying like, we'll help you just get from point A to point Z in this way. So a lot of times entrepreneurs explain the mechanics of the inside, like, especially when it comes down to AI and machine learning. Like, if we talk about that, like, people really don't really care about the AI and machine learning. It's more like, what am I doing? So if I'm reversing my car, it's got parking sensors. I don't say my car's got AI. I'm just like,
fair enough. I mean, again, that's things that happens in the back end, right? What is the customer-facing aspects of it, and how do you communicate that? Like honestly, a show of hands, who actually knows what AI is? And that's a technical crowd here, right?
Yeah.
Go and ask any man on the street, I'm sure that they will frown upon it. Or if you talk about blockchain, or if you talk about Bitcoin, these are things that are at the moment frowned upon because people don't understand it. People might have hopped on the Bitcoin train a little bit too late, but they don't understand the mechanics behind it, so don't try and explain it to them, unless they're a researcher, right?
Yeah, excellent. And now coming to crowdfunding in a way that maybe equity crowdfunding, what would be your advice if somebody wants to do it properly? I remember part of the conversation we had the other time was that it's a platform where you already could utilize your existing network to kind of back you towards a goal, as opposed to you haven't spoken to anybody and then just launch. Like,
I would almost say that before you even kind of like look at crowdfunding or equity crowdfunding as an option for you, start with the basics. And again, I'd like to stick with that car analogy just for a little bit and kind of like try and break it down into 3 segments, right? What does it actually take to get funded through something like equity crowdfunding or Kickstarter or stuff like that? First of all, I think that you need an extremely clear destination of where it is that you're looking at going and a particular purpose of what it is that you're looking at doing. And I can talk about that in an aspect of, let's say you're hopping in a car, you pull up Google Maps, you put in a very clear destination. That destination might be Uppington, Northern Cape, right? There's probably a couple of ways that you can drive from here. You can go Hull, take the R45, jump onto the N7, eventually get there, or you can take the N1, take the N7. But because we're so kind of like strapped for time, and because we want to take each and every available time or each and every available opportunity to kind of like grasp at anything that's going to make money, we get pulled in different directions. And we most likely end up driving and end up in Uppington, but you've gone via Johannesburg. And that takes a lot of money. And that kind of like brings me to the second point, which is, now that you've actually decided where it is that you're going to be going, you need to figure out how much fuel you're actually going to need, right? Because we need to first of all understand what is the plan and why are we doing this. And what goes into a basic plan is the fact that you need to have a why. Why are you doing this? Is it because you want to make money? You can get out of this room and you can walk and go and rob a bank because you're going to make a lot more money than what you're actually going to do with a startup, because it's long, it's tedious, it takes a lot of time, right? What is your purpose? Like, what is the impact or the legacy that you actually want to leave behind? Because these are things which are very important for international investors. These guys want to know all of these type of aspects. Then you need to have a grand vision and a strategy to understand, like, how are you going to break that down into smaller deliverables and actually execute on this at the end of the day? And then a plan like this also needs to have a couple of promises that you need to know. And these are the things like, how are you going to convince your investors? How are you going to attract people in the market? Like, how are you going to make your sales? And what products or services are you actually going to put into the market that's going to solve a massive problem? Now, once you've got that, and you've actually clearly figured out how to sell this BMW that you have, right? Now we need to figure out how much fuel it is that you're actually going to need in order to get there. You do not want to drive via Johannesburg. We all want to have the smoothest ride when you get there. And then the third point here is to understand what is the occasion and what is the kind of like the appropriate vehicle and the appropriate crew that you're going to take with. Are you going to go for a nice hunting weekend and you're going to take a couple of buddies? Then you're not going to take bottles of wine, but you're going to take a 5-year brandy and make sure that there's enough ice and a couple of mixtapes and everything, and you want to take the best crowd that you can actually have with you. So for me, it's like, it's quite easy to get funding and to actually get funded through an international network, but if you don't know how to communicate that plan, and if you don't have a solid plan kind of like moving ahead, then it doesn't matter how hard you actually shout at Twitter and how much marketing you're going to be spending at the end of the day. It's not going to resonate with anyone, because international investors have a very different way of how they want to see certain things, and particularly when it comes down to impact, right? A lot of us are talking about impact investing. Think about your company and the type of impact that it's actually going to make when you are potentially bringing primary health care to people that need it the most, or other services.
Brilliant. Tell us now about the business innovation group and what you're working on currently. And we're going to start taking questions from the audience and then continue tweeting. Hashtag #StartCBT.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, I'm just going to kind of like wrap up a little bit. So in terms of Funded by Me, we have been around now for 10 years. We have been able to do things very successfully in Europe. We've got offices, quite diverse offices. We're up to about 50 people as it is today, but the type of companies that we funded to date has been very much like technology-driven, consumer products, food and beverage, and we've been able to build up a fantastic network. What we bring to the table is essentially a network of 320,000 plus investors that is growing on a day-to-day basis. And not all of those guys who've actually invested, but the ones that have invested more than R1 billion into about 470 companies and growing. So my ambition obviously is to grow the business beyond borders. Like, I want to make sure that everyone has the ability and has the fairness to kind of like chat with any type of investor at any particular given time. Because we know that most likely the association with capital here is banks, private equity, friends and family and stuff like this. So we want to bring alternative sources of funding to the people that actually need it the most at a lower cost of capital as well. Now, the more we actually started speaking to people, we saw that when we looked at a lot of businesses, the plan wasn't ready. And as we started speaking to a lot of the financial guys here, we saw that they want to get involved in crowdfunding and they want to get involved in all of these businesses. But most of your funds, most of your banks, all these guys have a set of rules, right? Money has rules, and it doesn't comply to startups. So how do we create a bridge in between these? And that's why today I'm going to announce the fact that we've partnered up with a company called Thrive. It's a business innovation group where we reimagine companies from the ground up, and we focus on 4 pillars. We help people plan it, we help people fund it, we help people build it, and we help people scale the idea as well. So if you talk about kind of, let's say, a normal consultancy, what they might do is they might work on your plan and they'll go like, here, there you go do that yourself, right? But luckily we've been able to sit in a very fortunate position in Europe, being very connected to a lot of the tech guys, a lot of content companies and so on. So we want to give people that kickstart or that acceleration where you can go like, if you have a great idea and we can work with you, we can build up the teams around you in order to make sure that we can give you that kickstart so that you can speak to a lot of the international investors and fuel your growth.
Okay. Thanks. We're going to take questions from the audience.
First of all, to stand up. Cool. Hi. So you mentioned that you are sort of trying to come to Africa and do like a whole border expansion funded by me and get crowdfunding here. But then earlier you also mentioned that it's not so much of a thing here. Like you said that culturally there's different understanding of it, and that's why it's not as big as opposed to like Europe per se, right? So I'm curious as to what your plans are in place, other than the aspect of like getting people like Thrive and bringing them in, because to me, this is not an attack, it's just a curious question. To me it seems like, okay, you can bring Thrive and gang in, but it still doesn't solve the problem of educating customers and that kind of stuff around the aspect of crowdfunding. Yeah, we've had like an anomaly with Uprise Africa, I think, and there is like 32 bars under there, but one could argue is that just VCs pumping through the platform. But yeah, to get my question.
Understood, yeah, 100%. I mean, so for me, actually just like the word charity is a bit of a swear word, I actually think that crowdfunding in terms of educating people is a bit of a swear word. So you'll actually notice that nowhere during this presentation or conversation did I actually mention that. But I'm trying to put it in a different way where I say like, our aim is to turn passionate people into passionate owners. Because as soon as you, again, start introducing a lot of these technical terms and you go like, We're a decentralized platform where people can buy and sell shares with machine learning that can recommend things based on AI bots and stuff like that. My ears tear, oh my eyes tear, and that's why I think that it hasn't worked really well. The thing that has worked really well is a stock fell, right? So everyone understands what a stock fell is. So how do we as a company change our narrative so that it can adapt to a local market and actually make sense? Now, Vu is a very, very good friend of mine. He's a friend of ours as well. And not into bits, he's an amazing kind of like visionary person. The thing that I find where we have a bit of a up over the rest of them is that because we've been around for such a long time, we've been able to build an amazing network. Now, I want to take that network, just like I've taken all of my skills and brought that back to Africa right now, and get all those individuals to understand the amazing opportunities which is here. Because quite often we talk about the problems that South Africa has. Those are the biggest fucking opportunities, just by the way. You don't have any digital identities. There's no access to primary health care. Our roads are shit. These are all the type of things that we can do in terms of like creating amazing opportunities, and not just giving an investor another ability to kind of like invest in Facebook for cats or Airbnb for grandmas or something like that, but actually give them technology and investment options that make sense, that resonates with a crowd, and that's what we're doing. We're building a bridge between Europe and Africa to give you guys cheaper capital over here.
Evening. First of all, thanks for coming out. I'm just wondering, being where you are, you're kind of uniquely suited now to get a grasp on what kind of incentives move investors. So through crowdfunding, admittedly I'm not that familiar with the FundedByMe, but I'm more familiar with like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where it's more individual people buying the future product to fund the company coming up. But I had a look on your website now. It seems like it's investors that are buying into a company in an investor sense. So what kind of incentives have you seen moves investors the most? Is it sort of the education of the business owners? Is it the idea? Like, what kind of profile can you create just offhand that,
So you remember the Arno that I mentioned like 10 years ago that made a lot of mistakes and stuff like that? I actually want to prevent all those type of things. The network that we're building up is people with a diverse set of skill sets. And what I like to do is look at it as not the power of one, but the power of many. How do you take not just 1 or 2 or 3 investors, but how do you take 100, 200, 500, 5,000 investors and actually help them fuel the growth of the company? Because if you might think of yourself as a retail product or a consumer product or something, there's a certain amount of engagement that you need. There are certain doors that you need to open up. And as small businesses, we want to do everything, but we don't have the capacity to do that. So I look at this as a enabler for growth, where you can leverage the power of many people and help them push your company forward.
And so if I can just follow up, so what kind of things in the investments draw people the most? What would you say is, what key points?
So, first of all, it's got to be a relevant valuation, right? You can't value a company. Okay, let's just talk about valuation first of all. When you go to any bank or any private equity firm or stuff like that, they're going to scrutinize you on your profit and loss statements. They want to look at everything that you're doing right now. The nice thing about crowdfunding is the fact that people understand the future vision, the future value of this company. So just make sure that the valuation is right, but like any type of seed investment, you got to have a really strong team. And when I talk about the vehicle and who you're taking along on that particular journey, I'm talking about the team. Who do you have that is essentially going to be able to drive this company forward? So it's not really about the incentive, like how can you give someone a 10% discount or something like that. It is more about the scalability of a project. If it is a mom and pop shop, There is a certain kind of like extent for it, but you know, maybe you can turn that mom and pop shop into a fantastic product that instead of focusing on getting people through the door, try and get your product through other people's doors, if you see what I mean. Right? It's got to be able to scale.
Thanks. Question.
Hi, my name is Anrisha. You were using the example about if you had to go to the man on the street and ask him about what AI is or anything to do with blockchain, and they wouldn't be able to give a proper answer. And with South Africans or our local community, you also mentioned how they are familiar with and they like something like a stock car. And I think the difference is that the greatest barrier is that people don't understand fully how something works, and that's the reason why they're not open to it. And as you mentioned earlier in your catchphrase, it's very difficult to simplify something so that it's easily understood by everybody. So in terms of your company specifically, how does it work in terms of ownership? So crowdfunding, if we were to break down the word, yes, we get that there are multiple people that will have to fund us.
Yep.
How does it work in terms of ownership, in terms of what they get back? Does it function like a loan? So all those kinds of questions, people are afraid to ask because then it shows that they don't understand. So I think it's helpful to explain.
I'm happy to kind of like explain that. And you know, essentially, equity crowdfunding is the fact where you issue new shares in a company and you allow people to take ownership of your company. So for instance, if you issue 1,000 new shares and you have, let's say, 200 buyers that take up all of that 1,000 shares, it might be distributed between different values. So what you actually own is a percentage of the company that dilutes over time as the company takes in more capital to grow. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you. Now, I've been following through what you have been trying to explain, and I see you play on that global platform right now. There's this key thing. Most of us seated here are all entrepreneurs, and we've built systems. We've built everything that's probably what we thought we had that we need to do and get right. What is the key thing you would say, this is what has helped you to scale, talking about your business? Because it's just not enough to say, have an idea, this is what they are looking for. I'm sure most of us have been trying to put these things in place, but what is, from your own experience and from that global perspective, how would you say this is the key thing that you need to start looking into so we all have a focus and we're not just everywhere? We know
that's a fantastic question. And I would say stop building around systems and start building around problems. Right? Figure out what is the problem that you are trying to solve.
Isn't that what we're so used to? Solve problems. Isn't that so cliche? Something we would be hearing.
I honestly don't think that it's cliche at all. I mean, again, I talk about the state of South Africa and having seen things in Europe over the past like 17 years. We have banking systems that work. We have personal IDs and digital IDs that work. You know, we don't have paper traces and paper trails where if you need to go and buy a car, you need to get a traffic register number because you're an international person, and then you need to get all of these police clearances and shit like that. It's fucking frustrating, right? No, sorry for the language, but it's very frustrating. Because in Europe, you have a digital identity and you walk into any place and you verify yourself. So those are problems that South Africa and Africa and even other places have. I mean, South America, bigger parts in Europe actually has those issues as well. But think about the problem that you're trying to solve and do not complicate things. If we look at some of the most scalable business ideas and things that have actually made it, why does WhatsApp have 2 billion users? Because it solves one issue, and that's communication. And again, it's very easy to create a complicated business that no one understands. It's very complicated to create an easy business that everyone understands.
Thank you. Mutelo is my name. And my question is around, at the beginning when you question of when you've been working on your vision and it's still new, and you feel like I've put my aim very clear here, I like what I've written here, and then explain it. And then the next time you find out that you keep the way you write it, you're putting it, maybe on paper or across, it keeps changing a bit to a point where you feel like you are very clear where what is it that you want to see. But so do you kind of experience that, and how do you solve such a problem?
In the beginning, a company it's shaping, it's taking many different forms. You might pivot from one idea to another idea very, very quickly. I would say the more you actually go out and just try things on paper and speak with someone so that you can get that external input without sitting in the server room and kind of like coding something and building things around technology. Focus on the problem and focus on what it is that you actually want to do at the end of the day. Like figure out that why and refine it by speaking to more and more people. A fantastic way of actually doing this is, like if I could backtrack to the beginning of FundedByMe and I had someone like myself that could mentor me or be an advisor, I would have been like running so much quicker. So find someone who has the relevant kind of like domain expertise who can help you refine that idea and test it on them. Because that's a very easy way of just reaching out and saying like, hey, I would love to buy you a coffee and just try out an idea. The thing is like, all of us who are sitting in here, we have some sort of expertise, right? I'm sure that if you float that idea past many people in this room, you might get some information and some feedback to help you refine that idea even more. And it is a very simple trick. It works a lot. Try it out.
Yeah. When you're dealing with social problems, when you're looking at a social problem that gives birth to many other social problems. So you're looking at it and you're looking at what is the cause. But the more you dig, the more you see. And you kind of find yourself looking at, yeah, it becomes complex.
It does. And, that's why you need people to kind of like give you a little bit of a reality check. And sometimes, instead of running 150 miles an hour, we need to pull the handbrake and just take a hawk's eye view to see what it is that you are essentially doing. And again, I want to go back to the kind of like the business innovation group that I'm a partner of and that we have essentially kind of like established. That is the whole idea behind it, that we want to help companies to understand that initial stage of like, who am I? What am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the social impact and the legacy that I want to leave behind, so that you have a clear path that doesn't take you via Johannesburg, that's going to cost you a lot of money, but it takes you directly to Appleton.
If I can add something to that clarity. So I find that a lot working with different entrepreneurs around South Africa, and then working with people like the 22 countries I've been to now, that here people, because there is a lot of incentive, so but the incentive is around tech. So okay, we're investing in tech, there's a tech hub, tech innovation, tech here, then people are forcing everything to be tech. Like if it's tech, then you're gonna get money from TIA, and then now you sitting with a solution and you're looking for a problem. You say like, I've got this, but hey, I've got the hammer, where's the nail, where's the nail? And you miss the whole thing. Like you're struggling because actually you just need to sell. Like, what problem are you solving? And then you describe the tech again. And because it says, if you build tech, there is money. But actually, if you solve a problem, there is money. And tech is an accelerator. So without tech, it takes you 5 days to do something. But you do it manually first. Then afterwards, you apply the tech to reduce the time. Believe me, when you're non-tech, you're making money. Investors will switch their mandate, say, we invest in tech companies and this agricultural, because you're making money and because you're solving that problem. And then a byproduct of that is that you employ people and you solve the unemployment issue, as opposed to, we have the tech, we want to fight unemployment. It's not a business. Cool. Cheers.
Hi, my name is Grant. My question is quite simple. I just want to know, for example, at what stage a business needs to be before we could approach a company such as FundedByMe. So, for example, in my stage, my company, we're busy developing a device to solve a problem which would typically even be done in this dry dock. And we're needing funds to be able to progress for the development. Would a company like that be able to work through FundedByMe, or do we need to be at more advanced stages?
That's a very good question, and you know, some of the early kind of like seed financing you can usually find through friends and family and so on. I would say that obviously from a perspective of going into a new market, we're not going to be super selective, but we want to be selective about the investments and the opportunities that we list on FundedByMe. Why? Because I have a very specific reason in making sure that that network which is sitting overseas gets such an appetite for what's happening here that they do not want to miss out. So I want to make sure that I can mitigate that risk at least from companies that are a little bit beyond that startup phase. And yes, I know, people like Spotify and all these guys still call themselves a startup, right? But you have to be beyond that. Let's call it valley of death. You have to have a physical working thing where, your company is actually kind of like getting pulled in different directions and you don't know which way to grow. And that's really where you need to figure out the core and figure out how much cash it is that you need. Because once you've figured that out and you know where you're going to be going, then you're going to be so much better aligned in terms of like taking in capital. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, in terms of like due diligence and kind of risk capital, what are your thoughts on that? With your investors who are investing in a product, early stage, seed, Series A, whatever it might be, what are your thoughts on risk capital and just taking a loss? And what kind of due diligence would you have to have done? Thoughts?
Good question. So from FundedByMe's perspective, we are not a financial institution, so we're not allowed to give the information and say that we're doing a full due diligence on everyone. What I can say is that because we've been operating in this space for a long time, we're sitting on a lot of data, and we generally know what works, what doesn't work. So if we can have things like social signals and look at least at the companies incorporated and look at like valuations versus historical things for different verticals that people have raised in, we get a pretty good sense on whether it works or not. In terms of like risk capital, I'm going to be 100% like honest with you. We have had companies that have failed. It's part of the game. I'm not going to bullshit about it, right? But there has been some amazing companies that have done amazing things. Like last year we had very American. Last year we had an esports company that actually came to us that got 150 investors that actually joined their journey, and early in 2020 they were acquired by another gaming company, like a big conglomerate, and these guys are now, I don't know all the names, but they are like the Nordic champions in League of Legends and Rainbow Six Siege and stuff like that. So at least these guys have made a nice earning. And the same with, obviously I'm personally invested in, and I'm super excited about it, but in a couple of months, one of our biggest cases is going to be launching their first EV, electric vehicle, right? A small city car that focuses on kind of like ride sharing and this whole sharing economy, but can take you from A to B in a short space. Now, this was started by a couple of university students 5 years ago or something. And they were able to utilize their university friends and all of the faculty members and stuff like that. And they ended up getting like 18 million rand for a crazy idea that they had at that stage. So yes, there is the crazy entrepreneurs, right? And some of them are going to work, some of them are going to fail. But that's obviously the nice thing about crowdfunding, is that you can take $100 or 100 rand and you can put it in here, or you can take your 10 rand or 10,000 rand that you put in there. So we do have an amazing spread of investors that invest anywhere between your 100 rand up to millions per ticket.
Great. Thank you very much, Arno. Big hand for Arno, please.